Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. My guest today is Tom Richter, and our topic is evangelism and missions in the local church. Tom, thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Man, thanks so much for having me.
Let me tell you about Tom. Tom is the pastor of Cullman First Baptist Church located in northern Alabama. First Baptist Church is known to have a rich history of ministry and missions. Before moving to Cullman, Tom served for 14 years as pastor in New York City at a church called New Hope Christian. New Hope is in the Jamaica neighborhood area of Queens, New York City. Tom was born and raised in Murray, Kentucky, attended Murray State University, and received a degree in English literature and then a Master of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary, followed by a doctorate of ministry from Beeson Divinity School. He's married to Jackie, and they have 3 children, Katie, Carson, and Anna. Tom, let's jump right into these questions. So tell us how you came to faith in Jesus. How'd you become a Christian?
Yeah, so I grew up in a godly family, and so it was really a natural next step for me. And so I was about 9 years old, and my older sister came to faith and was baptized. I guess she was a couple years older than me. And when I was about 9, I started asking those questions. And it was a logical thing. You know, I come from the kind of family where that was celebrated, and
Sure.
A baptism was something to rejoice about. And
what church were you guys? What church were you guys part of?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Cincinnati, Ohio,
Okay.
and when I was 5, my dad moved from Cincinnati. I mean, you know, my dad got transferred with his job, and the Kroger company opened up a little plant in Western Kentucky called Kinlake Foods
Yep.
to manufacture food products. And so we landed way out in the county, in Callaway County, and I was at a little country church called Locust Grove Baptist Church.
I know Locust Grove. I've been
Yep.
there. I've been there before. So, being saved at age 9, was there a time after that where you had a period of, did I really understand at that time, or did you just really get up as a young boy and just walk with the Lord? What was your early formative experience like?
Oh, absolutely. I had a lot of those doubts that are very common, I find, among among people that were born again at such a young age.
Yeah.
You know, did I know enough? Was I truly repent? What did I really have to repent of?
Right.
And and then in the sort of revivalist circles, we would go to these evangelism conference, and then something I'd never heard of was this sinner's prayer. And I thought, well, I didn't pray those words. I certainly didn't pray those exact words.
Right.
And so, I went and I got some wise counsel in my late teen years in college. Hey, you know, you're putting a lot of focus on what you did or didn't do as a kid. What about the focus on Jesus?
Yeah.
Like, when you stand before God, will he be there? Can he be trusted?
Yeah.
Do you think he can be trusted? And that shift has helped me as I counsel young people who deal with that. Is so common, you know, and as in a Bible Belt church, especially. I'm able to say, hey, this may be I don't want to give anybody false assurance, but I also want to guard against that needless doubt and say, hey, let's think about what Jesus did, not what we did or didn't do, but who do you trust? They say, well, I trust Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, well, say that back to yourself.
Yeah, that's so good.
I trust Jesus. Oh yeah, I trust Jesus. You know.
That's so good. So when you're helping folks with the issue of assurance, you're trying to get them not so much on what happened at age 9 or 13 or 27, but on putting your focus on Christ. Tell us more about that. So,
well, yeah, exactly. So I just try to shift the framework a little bit, you know. And so you're going to stand before God one day. Yeah. I said, why should he let you into heaven? The righteousness of Jesus Christ. That's your only hope, the blood of Jesus. I said, good. Okay. So we agree with that. Usually their doctrine of justification by faith is always right on.
Yep.
I say, well, okay. So then if Jesus doesn't show up for you in that day, if he just decides he doesn't want you, or if he forgets that appointment, you know, what hope do you have? And they'd say, I have nothing. I'm like, so you have no backup plan. You can't say, like, I was a good person. I have nothing. I'm like, so you're telling me all your eggs are in one basket. You have your only hope for eternity is Jesus, that he'll show up for you. Yes, he's my only hope. I'm like, well then say that, just say that to yourself. Your only hope is Jesus. Yes. I'm like, well, that sure sounds like somebody who's trusting Jesus.
That's so good.
and helping them come to that, I hope, is an encouragement. Yeah.
So, Tom, I'm having two things going on here. I mean, I love the way you're counseling someone who is dealing with doubt. I had a serious struggle with doubt this season in my own life. But I also love the fact that I'm seeing this Murray boy. All of a sudden, you just took on this New York City persona when you started having this conversation about assurance of salvation. So you were there long enough to really get ingrained in some of the we're going to talk more about that. So how did you know that God was calling you into ministry? How did that happen?
Yeah. So I told you I grew up in a godly family. Dad's a deacon, but he worked at a factory as a quality control manager. My mom is a teacher, teaches Latin and English at a high school there. I don't know of any ministers, grandparents, uncles. I don't know of any. I don't know. There may be somebody, but I don't know of any ministers in my family. And so I had no intention of ever being a pastor or a minister. And really, my model, in a small country church like that, Locust Grove had a pastor, a dear saint named Jack Jones, who was there like 40 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And so here's this man who's very elderly, very kind, but to a 15-year-old or 16-year-old, that would be like saying, hey, have you considered going to Mars? I mean, that's just on another planet. I don't have a category for that. I didn't know about youth ministers. I didn't know about, all these, different aspects of ministry. I just knew that preacher is so different for me that I had no category, and yet could not escape the sense at about 14, 15, 16 years old, couldn't escape the sense that God was wanting me to be a preacher. I don't know any other way to put it. Jeff Eorg has a book about is God calling me? That's been super helpful because I think he, looking back, of course, I didn't have that book then,
right?
But I don't know any other way to say it. I just felt a strong impression that that's what I'm to do, to the point where, Todd, I was losing sleep as a teenage boy, going, wait a minute, for lots of reasons. One, Lord, I don't need to be doing this. I don't need to be a minister. You got the wrong guy. And two, I'm a teenager. Like go bother somebody else who's further down the career track, and I don't need to be making a decision like this. But couldn't sleep, had no peace, and in the providence of God, that pastor retired, and I don't remember the exact group of interims or folks that were there, but we had a young pastor. He was only probably less than 10 years older than I was, and he played basketball.
Well.
And that just blew my mind, and me and my best friend Jeff are out outside of the church, and the parsonage was across the street. And this guy, Brother Kevin, he comes out and shooting hoops. And that alone was mind blowing, that a pastor could shoot hoops, And then he was really good and says to me, remember what I'm wrestling with. And he says, I was actually offered a college scholarship to play basketball, but I turned it down to go to Bible school because God wanted me to be a preacher. Wow. And of course, me and my buddy are like, are you crazy? Like, who would do such a thing? Right. And he said something that changed my life, or at least you could say it nudged the trajectory of my life. We've talked about it since, and he doesn't remember saying it, but I remember it. He said, but what good is all that if you don't have peace with God in your heart?
Wow.
Swish, mid jump shot. And that was it. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, that's it. What good is everything? If I don't have peace with God over this, I'm battling him, but I need to surrender. And that phrase, as cliche as it might sound, surrender to God's call to ministry. That may be a cliche for some people. That is absolute. There's no better sentence to describe what happened to me. It was a surrender to God's call. I went forward, and that was it. And of course, I'm a small country church, so everybody's filing by, shaking my hand. And all these little old ladies, we've known since you were 5.
I was going to say,
we knew.
So Tom, they knew it.
I'm going, what?
They already saw it in your life. So you mentioned Jeff Orge's book. He identifies 3 callings. One is the universal call to Christian growth and service. Every Christian is to be a growing, serving Christian. The general call to ministry leadership. That's what you're describing. You answered a call, and then a specific call to a ministry assignment. And of course, that's what you're doing right now at Cullman First Baptist. But man, one of the indicators, everybody else has seen it before you do. They already saw it in your life.
And I even asked, well, why didn't anybody tell me? Yeah. And I think it was my mom or somebody, I remember saying, well, we didn't want to put our thumb on the scale. I don't know what word she used, but she didn't want to influence something artificially. It's got to come from God. And so, but that pastor, incidentally, was Kevin Ham. Kevin,
oh, wow.
A lot of people know Kevin from Valley View.
Yep.
and of course now at Gardendale. But what they may not know is right out of seminary, he was the pastor for a couple of years at Locust Grove Baptist Church in Murray, Kentucky. He was my pastor. And I think we've talked about it since. I may be, if not one of, the first young man to surrender to the ministry under his ministry. So he's always had a soft spot, I think, for me. And we've reconnected now. His church is about an hour away. And so we've had a chance to reignite that old friendship. And I'm thankful to God for that and for his, just for what he said. He doesn't remember saying it, but
well, Tom,
I sure
what's so interesting about Kevin is, so Kevin came out of, if I'm not mistaken, he came out of Glendale Church in Bowling Green that was pastored by Richard Oldham, and there were a group of folks surrendered to ministry under Brother Richard. I think they call themselves the Swordsmen or something like that now, but they still meet up, and it's a large group, and Kevin was one of those that surrendered under him. Richard was there for, I don't know, 40, 50 years, never married, but just left an incredible legacy of men like Kevin who answered the call under his life, and just seeing that continued. Have you seen guys surrender to ministry in the places you've served? Has that happened?
Yeah, a few. Yeah, I sure have. Yeah.
That's exciting. Well, so let's talk a little more. You grew up in Murray, and you went to school at Murray, and you were part of it's called BCM now, but then it was BSU. So what did BSU stand for?
Baptist Student Union when I was there.
So today it's Baptist Campus Ministry. Tell us how campus ministry and Baptist campus ministry, how did that impact your walk with the Lord?
Oh man, it was huge for me. It was huge. I majored in BSU. Keith Inman was my campus minister there. A lot of folks will know Brother Keith, and he, I think internally and externally. There was a bumper sticker in the Murray State BSU building that said, it's cliche now, everybody knows this now, but in 1995, the bumper sticker said, Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. Yeah. Again, that's just cliche now. That's obvious, but to me, that probably, I don't think you could put any better in a nutshell my experience of faith at BSU. That's where it really moved for me. It moved from religion to that personal relationship. I mean, think about the late 90s, Experiencing God is just coming out. I mean, it was just personally, I think it was the golden era of contemporary Christian music. DC Talk comes out with Jesus Freak and Jars of Clay. That's up for debate. That's another podcast. I could talk all day about that. But I just thought, I mean, what a great time that love relationship with Jesus that was, again, now it's probably cliche to talk in those terms, but man, so internally and then externally, just opportunities. The BSU, here I am doing something called Sun Teams, those Kentucky in-state revival teams. And that led to some opportunities at Centrifuge, and just, I'm so grateful. Folks, can you imagine letting me and my college roommate was the worship guy, and we would just go out, I'd preach, he'd lead worship, and we'd go do those revivals, just those opportunities. That is, what's better than that? So I'm so grateful.
I think that's what's maybe misunderstood about Baptist campus ministry. We have large crowds. We have, I think, 8 that are part of our KBC work, and then there's several more that we work with other campuses, and we want to be on more campuses. But it's a leadership development pipeline. It seems like that's the place. So Marina Shelton, who helped us on this call earlier, she came out of the Murray Campus Ministry program, and it's just a great place to develop. And as you said, let's just put you out there and see what happens, and you'll get some feedback and change some things, do this different. Sounds like that was the experience in your life as well.
Yeah, oh, no question. And in the church planning world, we were next to a university there, St. John's, that had a campus ministry. And I'll tell you this, when those students graduated, the ones who stuck around, I would go find their campus minister and just say, hey, thank you for giving me a ready-made leader.
Wow.
Like, they know how to lead a Bible study. They know how to do things that it takes so much energy to get them through that leadership pipeline. A good campus ministry has produced, they are going to bless whatever local church they end up in. Yep. I know pastors can tell you, we give them to us.
That's good. That's great to hear. You've had a couple of major cultural transitions. So you ministered in New York City, and in Queens, New York City, and then you moved from there to Cullman, Alabama. So I know there were a couple of stops in between, but basically Murray to Queens, Queens to Alabama. So talk about those transitions. Yeah. What was that like for you and the people that you were trying to serve and lead?
Yeah. So after my time at Murray State, I knew I was going to go to seminary. I ended up at Princeton Seminary in New Jersey, and I think being there, it's not a Southern Baptist seminary. That's a whole other story. But it was interesting to see how I sort of, in some odd way, maybe at the end of my time there at Princeton, I ended up maybe more confessionally Southern Baptist than I was when I went in. Sometimes, anyway, unintended consequences. So I graduate seminary, and now what? And there was a church plant going on in Queens, and so the North American Mission Board had planted this church. And they had some support from a church in the Atlanta area, Fayetteville First Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always say Fayetteville was doing church planting before it was cool. They were just kind of doing it. And I was traveling around speaking as a youth speaker. And in fact, I thought maybe that's what I'll do when I graduate. I'll just be a youth speaker. And I'm preaching at a Disciple Now in Fayetteville. And the guy's dropping me off at the airport after a lovely weekend. And he says, hey, what are you going to do when you graduate? I told him what I just told you. And he said, well, would you consider maybe pastoring this church plant that we're supporting in Queens, New York? It's we've got a guy who's planted it, but every time he wants to leave and plant other churches, we can't seem like to get a pastor to stick. In fact, the last guy we got, he got cancer and had to move away. So we want you to do it.
Yeah.
Well, this is like the worst, sales pitch ever.
That's right.
But of course, they get you with, would you pray about it?
Yeah, that's right.
And I was single at the time, and I couldn't shake the sense that, like, why not me? Like, here's a church that needs a pastor. It was a small immigrant church. The majority of my church members at New Hope were from South Asia. The majority were Indian, but we had every tribe, tongue, nation, and language. And along the way, God was just so gracious. And, I ended up marrying a girl that I met at a centrifuge camp, and we kind of dated long distance. And so we got married, had kids, 3 kids born in, my wife looks at me, my wife is from Alabama. And so my wife is saying, Tom, we're raising Yankees. Like, what do we do? The high-rise building and the whole urban life. And then, as you said, after 14 wonderful years there, and wasn't really looking to make a move, but it opened up, wanted a sense of being rooted somewhere. And New York's the kind of place where you can live your life in 1 or 2 year increments based on the length of your lease. Yeah. And we just kind of said, are we going to be here? And how many times can we keep asking that question? Wherever we go, Lord, just can we put down roots? We just want, if it's here, make it here. Fine. And so ended up and my wife was baptized in Cullman First Baptist Church. She is from Cullman, Alabama. Yeah. So the move back south for me and Jackie, my wife, it really wasn't a big, I grew up in Murray. I understand small town life. Jackie grew up here. What was funny was my kids. And so, just one little anecdote. My 5-year-old's in the front yard one day. We'd been here about 2 weeks. And he says, yo, Dad, I'm noticing something about our house. And I was like, what's that? He says, this house was built on a park. And I said, no, buddy, that's just a yard.
That's hilarious.
They have those here. And he's like, every house in Alabama gets a park, But anyway, it's been great.
So what had to change? So, I mean, New York City, fast-paced environment, and then Cullman, Alabama, great place, different pace of life. So what had to change for you personally? Like, what were the adjustments? You've left a very fast-paced ministry with a wide variety of people types, and then coming to Cullman. What had to change for you in your own thinking? How did you handle that transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. People are people, wherever they are. Yep. And I think when I went, this Kentucky kid from West Kentucky, when I ended up in Queens, I was like, that city is so big that you are never under the illusion that you have a clue what's going on. Yeah. So you never assume you've got the cultural narrative on anybody. You don't even try. You don't even try to assume that you have a clue at any moment what's going on. And the danger and the lesson I learned is moving here, you still don't have a clue about what people are really going through. Yeah. You still don't have a clue, but you're tempted to believe you do in a small Bible Belt town. And so the danger to assume, instead of letting people surprise you and letting people tell their story and finding out beneath that, we all put up that veneer, but beneath that veneer, that was huge for me. And I had to learn that lesson was like, don't assume. It's easy not to assume in a place like New York, but don't even assume in a place like Cullman that you always know what's going on in people's hearts and minds.
So Tom, how did you learn to kind of start asking questions, or what did you do to kind of get to know where people were, to hear their story? How do you do that now, not assuming you know people that you meet in Cullman, or how did you do it in Queens?
Yeah. I think it helps in a place like Cullman, it's small town, a lot of folks already know each other. There's a joke like around here, like, well, don't say anything bad. You're bound to be talking to somebody's cousin, know, and I think a lot of small town America kind of feels that way. It kind of helps that I'm not from here, so I can sort of play kind of the dumb outsider, like, hey, I don't know, tell me about this or tell me about that.
Yeah.
And then just the willingness to really listen. People will surprise you. People are I think people want to tell their story.
I think you're right.
You don't have an opportunity like to just tell your story.
I think most of us go through life waiting for our chance to talk. We want the other person to stop so we can share our part, and you're describing doing it just the other way. So missions and evangelism is a priority for you as a pastor. Why is that?
Yeah, at its best, missions and evangelism for a church can't not be a priority at its best. Somewhere, I think in Reflections on the Psalms, C.S. Lewis, talks about people spontaneously praise what they value.
Yeah.
Right? Did you see that? Wasn't that lovely? Isn't that great? And then he adds, like, not only, you're driving on a lonely road trip and you've been assigned the night shift and your buddies are all asleep, and over the horizon comes the most stunning sunrise you've ever seen. What do? It drives you crazy that they're asleep. Mm-hmm. So what do? You got to wake up. No, let me sleep. No, wake up. You got to see. And when they see it and they are able to behold what you behold, it's like, wow. In a weird way, my joy is not complete until they see it too.
Oh yeah.
It's like the natural consummation of my joy is that they see what I see. And that it's like the splendor of God is all around us. And no matter how bad you feel you are at evangelism, because I think most people do feel that they're bad at evangelism, most people agree the splendor of God is all around us. And it's like our friends and our neighbors and our loved ones, they're just asleep to the glory of God all around them. And as you see more and more of that glory, how can you not, like as an overflow, help wake people up to see the splendor and the glory of God, that it's really an overflow.
So Tom, you've been through BSU, BCM. Yep. You've pastored time in seminary. You pastored in New York City, and then now in Alabama. What have you seen to be most effective to help someone else catch a vision for missions and evangelism, or to help how do you help another guy catch an evangelistic zeal where he walks through life with a concern for lost people?
Yeah, I really do think it really starts with God. It starts with the being compelled by the love of God in your own life. And then at that point, it's really only a matter of seeing yourself as an encourager. I mean, like, you sort of have to get over the fact. And in some ways, as the culture shifts so rapidly, in some ways, I think we'll be helped by this. But we just have to be okay with being weirdos,
That's right.
But that's really okay.
That's
once you like books like First Peter. I mean, don't be surprised to see lots of sermon series on First Peter in the coming years. Yeah. Aliens and strangers.
Absolutely.
And it's like, why would you expect anything but feeling like an alien and a stranger? And that's okay. And that's one thing that really helped me in New York is everybody was from somewhere else. Yeah. Like, my beliefs were no weirder than this Hindu neighbor, this Muslim neighbor, this Wiccan, this pagan. Everybody's got something. And so.
That's really good, Tom. We have a desire, whether 15 or 50, we all have a desire to fit in. And sometimes one way not to do that is when you start sharing your faith views. And man, you're describing the need to normalize that. Tom, you're a speaker at our upcoming Reach conference. Thank you for your plans to come to Kentucky. I assume you have a topic. What are you going to be speaking about? And why should pastors and church leaders, church members, why should they attend gatherings like this one?
Oh yeah, I'm so looking forward to it. I want to be an encouragement to pastors. I am a pastor, and so my topic is really going to be encouragement for church leaders of all different types, and I hope that I can be that encouragement. And I will say this about registering for the Reach conference. As a pastor myself, it's like you you will never walk away from any of these conferences. You never regret going.
Yep.
But as a pastor, the urgent, we know this, always crowds out the important.
It's true.
And as a pastor, you're always going to have something that's more urgent than a conference, right? Yes. I mean, there's a million things, and there's that voice that says, no, I really need to be here. I should be here. And yet we all know that a conference like this is what's important. And I would just say, if I can be any encouragement, to not let the urgent crowd out the important, go ahead and register for this conference, sign up for it. And I know that when I do that, again, every time I leave a conference, I go, it doesn't even matter really the topic.
Right.
I mean, I've been to leadership ones or events. I always leave and I go, man, I'm so glad I came to that. I'm encouraged. I'm refreshed. I'm so glad I came. But there was a million reasons that were more urgent than coming. And so I think just kind of overcoming that urgency, the tyranny of the urgent, I guess.
I attended a conference yesterday and left thinking the exact same thing. I'm glad to have been with these people, to have heard, to focus on the 98% that's good about what we're trying to do together and accomplish, and just be reminded of the Great Commission and how different churches are carrying it out. Tom, you have a friendship with Lance Howerton, who's president of Crossings Ministries here in Louisville. How has that friendship impacted your life?
Oh man, all these guys, just in big and small ways. I mean, Lance just cares about everybody he meets. When you're with Lance, you're the most important person that he's talking to. And a shout out to the BCM guy at Murray State right now, Jonathan Clark, and I were classmates. And,
wow.
I'm looking forward. I hope Jonathan's going to be at Reach, and I look forward to seeing him. And I look forward to playing that. Do you know, like, because I know we're going to have all these connections and friends in Kentucky. I just can't wait to be back in the Bluegrass State, and really can't wait.
We look forward to seeing you. So this podcast is called Leadership Lessons. Can you tell us about an experience in your life that has shaped your approach to leadership or your understanding of what Christian leadership should look like?
Yeah, I had so many great mentors in my own life. It's just a short anecdote. I don't know that it was any great. I was thinking about this. We were ordaining a deacon in our church, and as he was on the ordaining council, people were asking him questions, and he was giving his testimony. He's pretty high up in his business, and he said something. For me, it's decision making. I overthink, I rethink, I second guess. And this guy who's pretty powerful in his business, he told this group of people on this council that were questioning him. They said, "Tell us about how you do your work." I mean, he said, "Well, I probably figure I make about 16 decisions a day, every day at work. And at the end of the workday, I just pray I got maybe 8 to 10 of them right."
I love that.
And I love exactly. And what that did, I don't know what it was, but that shook something loose in me that was like, why am I putting so much pressure on myself? I don't know the future. I'm not going to get these. If I can get 8 to 10 out of 16 right,
so good.
But what he was saying is, I can control integrity.
Yeah.
I can control faithfulness. I can be a high character guy, and this guy is a high character guy. But this high character guy doesn't mean that he knows the future. It doesn't mean that he's going to get everyone right. He's going to keep showing up, keep putting in work, keep being high character, and hope to get 8 to 10 out of 16 right. That was like a weight off my shoulders, and going, you know what? That's a better way to look at it. Here I am, Todd. I'm trying to get 8 out of 16 right.
Hey, man, that's a better way to look at it. You're batting 500 if you get 8 out of 16 right, which is not bad in baseball. Tom, if folks want to know more about you, how can they reach out to you, and how can they learn more?
Yeah, I've got a website, tomrichter.com. It's just myname.com. And from there, probably the best thing, we put our sermons every Sunday out at First Baptist Cullman. We put those sermons out every week. And so folks are a glutton for punishment. They can watch a sermon or two on that website. First Baptist
Cullman, Alabama. I listened to Tom's sermon from last Sunday, a text from, I think, Matthew, at least Sermon on the Mount. It sounded like it. And It was about, you have heard it said this, and here's what I say. And so Tom was showing Jesus' way of righteousness, and it's a great message. Encourage folks to go listen to it. Tom, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for joining Leadership Lessons, and we look forward to seeing you in Kentucky.
Thanks so much.